He was a man built from spare parts and stubborn hope, a single dad whose calloused hands fixed what was broken in his small, struggling town, even as the cracks in his own life seemed to widen with each passing year. He never imagined a late-night call about a flickering porch light at a neglected property would lead him to her, a teenage girl, shadows under her eyes, bruises hidden beneath a too large hoodie, a silent plea for rescue in her gaze. He offered her a warm drink, a moment of safety, a listening ear, completely unaware that this frightened child was escaping a darkness that had nearly swallowed her whole. What began as one man's simple act of compassion, a refusal to turn away, would ripple through years, forging an unbreakable bond and culminating in a gesture of gratitude so profound it would change his life and his daughter's forever. But can the scars of an abusive past truly heal, and can a kindness offered with no expectation of return truly build a bridge to a future neither of them dared to dream of? Before we begin this powerful story of courage, resilience, and the enduring light of human connection, if you believe that one person can make a world of difference and that love often arrives in the most unexpected packages, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. Now, let the shadows gather, let the first sparks of hope ignite, and let's dive into the life of a struggling single dad who helped a teen girl escape, and the incredible way she remembered his kindness. Let the story begin. The sputtering engine of Tom Henderson's ancient pickup truck was a familiar sound in the quiet streets of Oak Haven, a small town nestled so deep in the rolling hills it felt like time had politely decided to slow its pace there. Tom himself was a fixture, a man in his late 30s, his face etched with the lines of hard work and a quiet, lingering sorrow that had settled in his eyes since his wife, Laura, had lost her battle with cancer 3 years prior. Now his world revolved around two things: his 8-year-old daughter, Clara, a bright spark of sunshine with her mother's mischievous grin, and the endless struggle to keep their small handyman business, Henderson and Daughter, she supervises, afloat. Every leaky faucet fixed, every creaky floorboard silenced, was a small victory against the tide of bills that threatened to overwhelm them. His workshop, a converted garage behind their small paint-peeling clapboard house, was a testament to his skill and their precarious finances. A jumble of tools, spare parts, and half-finished projects, smelling perpetually of sawdust, oil, and determination. This particular evening was cold, the kind of late autumn chill that bit at exposed skin and hinted at the harsh winter to come. Tom was wrestling with a stubborn furnace in Mrs. Gable's old Victorian, the air thick with dust and the smell of burnt oil, when his phone buzzed. It was Martha Evans, a kind but notoriously anxious widow who lived on the outskirts of town, near the old Blackwood place, a sprawling, neglected property that had been empty for years, its history as dark and tangled as the overgrown woods surrounding it. "Tom, dear?" Martha's voice was thin, reedy with worry. "I know it's late, but there are lights on over at the Blackwood house. And I think I saw someone, a young person, by the porch. It just doesn't feel right. The place has been a ghost for years." Tom sighed, wiping grease from his forehead with the back of his hand. The Blackwood place? It was miles out, a good half-hour drive, and he was bone-tired. But Martha wasn't one for idle gossip, and there was a genuine tremor of fear in her voice. "All right, Martha," he said, his voice warmer than he felt. "I'll swing by on my way home, take a look. Probably just some kids messing around, but better safe than sorry." He finished up with Mrs. Gable's furnace, coaxing a reluctant flame from its ancient burners, then climbed into his truck, the engine groaning in protest. The drive to the Blackwood place was unnerving. The road narrowed, the trees pressing in, their bare branches skeletal against the bruised twilight sky. The house itself was a looming silhouette, windows dark and empty like vacant eyes. the once grand porch sagging in defeat. But Martha was right. A faint flickering light emanated from one of the downstairs windows, a fragile glow against the encroaching darkness. Tom parked his truck at the end of the long, weed-choked driveway and approached cautiously, his old mag light cutting a swathe through the gloom. The air was heavy, silent, save for the rustle of dry leaves underfoot and the distant hoot of an owl. As he neared the porch, he saw her, a girl no older than 16, huddled in the shadows of a crumbling stone pillar. She was small, almost bird-like, engulfed in a dark, oversized hoodie, her face obscured by a curtain of long, lank hair. She didn't move, didn't make a sound, but he could feel the fear radiating from her like a palpable force. "Hello?" Tom called out softly, keeping his voice non-threatening. "Is anyone there? Mrs. Evans asked me to check on the place." The girl flinched, her head snapping up, and for a fleeting moment Tom saw her face in the beam of his flashlight. Young, pale, and etched with a terror so profound it stole his breath. There was a dark, ugly bruise blooming on her cheekbone, partially hidden by her hair, and her lip was split and swollen. Her eyes, wide and haunted, darted around like a trapped animal seeking escape. "Go away," she whispered, her voice hoarse, cracking. "Please, just leave me here." Tom's heart clenched. This wasn't kids messing around. This was something far darker, far more dangerous. He knew that look, the look of someone who had seen too much, endured too much. He took a slow, deliberate step closer, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "My name is Tom Henderson. I live in Oak Haven. You look like you're in trouble. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, pulling the hood further over her face, but not before he saw the fresh tremor that ran through her small frame. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice hardening despite himself. She didn't answer, just hugged her knees tighter to her chest, a small protective movement that spoke volumes. Tom knew he couldn't just walk away. He couldn't leave her here, alone, in this desolate, decaying place. He thought of Clara, of her innocent trust, her unwavering belief in his ability to fix anything. And in that moment, something shifted within him, a quiet, unshakable resolve. "Look," he said, his voice softening again, "I'm not the police, I'm just a dad. My house is warm. I've got a daughter about half your age. You can have a hot drink, a safe place to rest for a bit. No questions asked, unless you want to answer them. What do you say?" He held his breath, waiting. The silence stretched, taut and fragile. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Just once. Relief, sharp and potent, washed over Tom. He didn't know who she was or what horrors she had fled, but he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that he had to help. He had no idea that this single act of compassion, this simple offering of sanctuary, would set in motion a chain of events that would redefine not only his life, but the life of the terrified girl huddled on the porch of the Blackwood mansion, a girl whose future, unbeknownst to him, held a gratitude as vast and transformative as the darkness she was currently escaping. The small Henderson house, with its slightly crooked porch swing and the lingering scent of cinnamon from Clara's morning oatmeal, was a world away from the decaying grandeur of the Blackwood place. As Tom led the girl, she still hadn't offered a name, through the front door, he saw her visibly relax, just a fraction, the tight coil of fear in her shoulders loosening almost imperceptibly. Clara, who had been patiently waiting for him on the sofa with a picture book, looked up, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy, who's this?" she asked, her voice a bright, innocent chime in the otherwise tense silence. Tom knelt beside his daughter, ruffling her hair. "This is a friend, Sweet Pea. She needed a warm place to stay for a bit. Can you be a good hostess, and maybe offer her some of those cookies we baked yesterday?" Clara's face lit up. "The ones with the sprinkles?" She scrambled off the sofa and hurried towards the kitchen, her small ponytail bouncing. Tom turned back to the girl, who was standing uncertainly in the middle of the small living room, her gaze sweeping over The worn but comfortable furniture, the crayon drawings taped to the walls, the overflowing toy basket in the corner. It was a home filled with love, if not with riches, and the contrast to the opulence and implied menace of the Blackwood mansion must have been jarring. "You can sit down," Tom said gently, gesturing towards the sofa. "Make yourself comfortable, or as comfortable as you can be." She perched on the very edge of the cushion, as if ready to bolt at any moment. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. Tom went into the kitchen, where Clara was meticulously arranging cookies on a plate. "Is she a princess, Daddy?" Clara whispered, her eyes shining. "Like in the story about the lost girl in the woods?" Tom smiled. "Maybe, Sweet Pea, maybe she is. Now, how about you take these to her, and I'll make some hot chocolate." When Tom returned with 2 steaming mugs, Clara was chattering animatedly to the girl, showing her a prized collection of sparkly rocks. The girl wasn't saying much, but she was listening, a tiny, almost invisible smile playing on her bruised lips. It was the first hint of warmth Tom had seen in her. He handed her a mug. "Careful, it's hot." She took it, her fingers brushing his, and he felt the tremor that still ran through her. "Thank you," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the swirling steam. For not leaving me there." "No one should be left in a place like that," Tom said, settling into his old armchair. "Especially not when they're hurt." He didn't press her for details, didn't ask about the bruises or the fear in her eyes. He knew that trust, like a frightened bird, had to be coaxed, not forced. They sat in a comfortable silence for a while, Clara's soft chatter filling the spaces. The girl, Tom wished he knew her name, sipped her hot chocolate slowly, her shoulders gradually unhunching, the tension in her frame easing bit by bit. Later, after Clara had been tucked into bed, her small face peaceful in sleep, Tom found the girl still on the sofa, the empty mug cradled in her hands. The fire he'd lit in the old wood stove cast a warm, flickering glow across the room. "You can take Clara's trundle bed tonight," he said. "It's not much, but it's clean and warm, and you'll be safe here." She looked up at him, her eyes shadowed in the dim light. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You don't even know me." Tom leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "I know what it's like to feel alone," he said quietly. "And I know what it's like to need a helping hand and not find one. My wife, Clara's mom, she was sick for a long time. Towards the end, a lot of folks, well, they just stopped coming around. It was easier for them, I guess." He paused, the old ache surfacing, familiar and unwelcome. "But I remember the ones who didn't turn away, the ones who brought a casserole or mowed the lawn without being asked or just sat with me in the quiet. Those small kindnesses, they mattered. They kept me going." The girl was silent, her gaze fixed on the fire. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she said, "My name is Lily. Well, Lillian, but everyone calls me Lily." Tom smiled. "It's a beautiful name, Lily, just like my Clara's favorite flower." A fragile connection, as delicate as a spider's thread, seemed to form between them in that quiet, fire-lit room. Lily didn't tell him her story that night, didn't speak of the gilded cage she had fled, of the stepfather whose kindness was a mask for cruelty, whose control had become a suffocating noose. She didn't speak of the mother too broken or too cowed to protect her. But as she lay in the small trundle bed, listening to the steady rhythm of Clara's breathing in the bed beside her, a tiny, unfamiliar feeling began to stir in Lily's bruised heart. It wasn't happiness, not yet. But it was something close to it. It was the tentative, fragile whisper of hope. And for the first time in a very long time, Lily slept without dreaming of shadows. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that Tom Henderson was a good man. And in a world that had shown her so much darkness, that small, simple truth felt like a lifeline. The days that followed settled into a quiet, tentative rhythm. Lily, or Lillian, as Tom sometimes called her, trying to honor the name she'd first offered, remained a shadow in the corners of their small house, but a shadow that was slowly, almost imperceptibly, beginning to absorb some of the light. She spoke little, her words often hesitant, as if she were unaccustomed to having a voice, or perhaps afraid of what might happen if she used it. But she watched everything with an unnerving intensity, her haunted eyes taking in the simple, everyday kindnesses that flowed between Tom and Clara, the shared jokes over breakfast, the patient way Tom helped Clara with her tangled shoelaces, the bedtime stories read in a low, soothing murmur. For Lily, whose life had been a landscape of emotional neglect, punctuated by outbursts of cold, calculated cruelty, these small moments of ordinary affection were a revelation. She began to help around the house, small, unobtrusive gestures, clearing the table without being asked, folding laundry with a meticulous, almost reverent care, even attempting to mend a tear in Clara's favorite teddy bear with a needle and thread she found in an old sewing basket. Tom, astute and patient, understood her need to contribute, to feel useful, to somehow earn her keep in this unexpected sanctuary. He never pushed, never pried, simply accepted her help with a quiet nod of thanks, allowing her the dignity of her own pace. Clara, with the uncomplicated acceptance of a child, had adopted Lily as a de facto older sister. She would follow Lily around the house, chattering about her day at school, her latest artistic creation, usually involving copious amounts of glitter, or the intricate social dramas of the playground. Lily, in turn, listened with a quiet attentiveness, her bruised face sometimes softening into a fleeting smile at Clara's innocent pronouncements. It was Clara who first coaxed a genuine laugh from Lily, a bright, startled sound that made Tom pause in his workshop, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the old wood stove. He discovered that Lily had a surprising knack for fixing things. One afternoon he came in from the workshop to find her hunched over the toaster, which had been stubbornly refusing to toast anything but one side of the bread for weeks. With a few deft movements of a screwdriver she'd apparently purloined from his toolbox, she had it working perfectly again. "How did you do that?" he asked, genuinely impressed. Lily shrugged, a faint blush creeping up her neck. My stepfather. He liked things to be perfect. If something broke, I learned to fix it. It was easier that way." The unspoken hung heavy in the air. Easier than facing his wrath, Tom understood. He didn't comment, just said, "Well, you've got a gift. Maybe I should hire you as my apprentice." Lily actually smiled then, a small, shy curve of her lips that made her look years younger, closer to the carefree teenager she should have been. But the shadows of her past were never far away. One evening Tom accidentally dropped a wrench in the workshop, the loud clang echoing through the quiet night. Lily, who had been sitting at the kitchen table sketching in a notebook Tom had given her, flinched violently, her eyes wide with a familiar terror, her body tensing as if bracing for a blow. Tom was at her side in an instant, his heart aching at her reflexive fear. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly, crouching beside her. "It was just me, clumsy old me. Dropped a tool, nothing to be scared of." Lily stared at him, her breath coming in shallow gasps, the color draining from her face. It took several long moments for the terror to recede from her eyes, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm so stupid." "No," Tom said firmly, his hand covering hers where it gripped the pencil with white-knuckled intensity. "You're not stupid, Lily. You're a survivor. And you have nothing to be sorry for. Not in this house. Ever." He stayed with her until her breathing evened out, until the tremor in her hands subsided. He didn't ask what had caused such a visceral reaction. He didn't need to. The ghosts of her past were still very much alive, and he knew with a grim certainty that they wouldn't relinquish their hold easily. The incident, however, seemed to mark a subtle shift. Lily began to talk more, not about the darkness she had fled, but about small, inconsequential things, a bird she'd seen outside the window, a song she remembered from a long-ago radio, a half-forgotten dream. It was as if, having glimpsed the depth of Tom's compassion, a small, tightly locked door within her had begun to creak open. She started spending more time in the workshop with Tom, not fixing things, but watching him, asking quiet questions about the tools, the engines, the intricate dance of mechanics. He, in turn, found himself explaining things to her, sharing his love for the logic and order of a well-tuned engine, the satisfaction of bringing something broken back to life. It was a language they both understood, a silent communication that transcended the need for words. One afternoon, as Tom was meticulously cleaning a carburetor, Lily picked up a discarded piece of scrap metal and a small hammer. Hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, she began to shape it, her brow furrowed in concentration, her small, deft hands moving with an unexpected grace. Tom watched her from the corner of his eye, a slow smile spreading across his face. She wasn't just fixing things anymore. She was creating something new, something beautiful from the discarded remnants of the old, just like she was, piece by piece, beginning to do with her own life in the quiet, unassuming sanctuary of his home. The tentative peace of the Henderson household was a fragile thing, a delicate ecosystem built on quiet kindness and unspoken understanding. Tom knew it couldn't last, not with the shadows of Lily's past looming so large. He'd made discreet inquiries around town, piecing together fragments of information about the Blackwood place. It was owned by a shell corporation, property taxes paid anonymously, locals warned off by rumors of unfriendly caretakers, and a reclusive, powerful owner. No one knew much, and those who did weren't talking. It all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple case of a runaway teen. He'd even driven past the Blackwood mansion a few times, always at a distance, a cold knot of dread tightening in his stomach each time he saw its dark, brooding silhouette against the skyline. There were signs of life now, lights in the windows at night, a plume of smoke from one of the chimneys, a dark SUV occasionally seen entering or exiting the long, gated driveway. They were looking for her, he was sure of it. He hadn't told Lily about his concerns, not wanting to add to her already considerable burden of fear, but he'd started taking extra precautions, varying his routes when he drove Clara to school, ensuring the doors and windows of the farmhouse were always locked, even during the day. He taught Clara and Lily a simple emergency plan, a meeting place in the woods behind their house, should anything happen. Clara, with her innate practicality, had absorbed it all with a serious nod. Lily had simply gone pale, her eyes reflecting a knowing dread that made Tom's heart ache. One blustery afternoon, as Tom was helping Clara with a particularly challenging math problem, fractions, his nemesis, a sleek, black car, utterly out of place in their dusty, rural neighborhood, pulled up in front of their house. Tom's blood ran cold. He instinctively moved Clara behind him, his eyes fixed on the car's tinted windows. A man in a sharply tailored suit emerged from the driver's side. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with an air of cold, professional detachment. He wasn't a thug. He was something far more dangerous, a lawyer or perhaps a fixer. Lily, who had been quietly sketching at the kitchen table, looked up, her eyes widening in recognition and a familiar, stark terror. She dropped her pencil, a small, clattering sound in the sudden, suffocating silence. "Mr. Henderson," the man said, his voice smooth, devoid of inflection. "My name is Arthur Pierce. I represent Mr. Alistair Cromwell, Lillian's stepfather. He's very concerned about her welfare. He's asked me to escort her home." Lily shrank back, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. Tom stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Pierce and the interior of his home. "Lily is fine," Tom said, his voice low and steady, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. "She's safe here." Pierce's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Safe? Mr. Henderson, with all due respect," Lillian is a minor. She is a runaway. Her legal guardian, Mr. Cromwell, is extremely anxious for her return. He has authorized me to offer a generous token of appreciation for your temporary assistance." The unspoken offer of a bribe hung in the air, heavy and insulting. Tom's jaw tightened. "She's not a piece of property, Mr. Pierce, and she's not going anywhere unless she chooses to." Pierce's smile faded. "Perhaps you don't understand the situation, Mistress Henderson. Mr. Cromwell is a very influential man. He is accustomed to getting what he wants. It would be unwise to stand in his way." The veiled threat was unmistakable. "And Lily," Pierce continued, his gaze flicking towards where she huddled by the table, "knows what happens when she disappoints her stepfather. Don't you, dear?" Lily flinched as if struck. Tom saw red. "Get off my property," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Now." Pierce raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his cold eyes. He clearly wasn't used to being defied. "This isn't over, Henderson," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Mr. Cromwell will not be deterred. He will have his daughter back, one way or another." With that, he turned, climbed back into the black car, and drove away, leaving behind a silence thick with menace. Tom locked the door, his hands shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. He turned to Lily, who was trembling, her face ashen. Clara, sensing the gravity of the situation, had crept to Lily's side, her small hand protectively on her arm. "He won't stop," Lily whispered, her voice filled with a despair that tore at Tom's heart. "Alistair, he never stops. He'll find a way. He always does." Tom knelt before her, taking her cold hands in his. "Listen to me, Lily," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "He may be powerful. He may have money and influence. But he doesn't have what we have." Lily looked at him, her eyes swimming with tears. "What's that?" "We have each other," Tom said, his gaze encompassing both Lily and Clara. "And we have truth on our side, and sometimes, Lily, that's all you need to fight a monster." He didn't know if he believed his own words, not entirely. Alistair Cromwell sounded like a formidable, ruthless opponent. But as he looked at the two girls before him, his own precious daughter, and this brave, battered girl who had somehow found her way into their lives and their hearts, he knew he would move heaven and earth to protect them. The fight was no longer just Lily's, it was theirs. And Tom Henderson, the struggling handyman from Oak Haven, was about to discover a strength he didn't know he possessed. The visit from Arthur Pierce, Alistair Cromwell's impeccably dressed harbinger of menace, had shattered the fragile illusion of safety that had begun to settle over the Henderson household. Lily retreated further into herself, the shadows under her eyes deepening, her already infrequent smiles becoming even rarer. She started at every unexpected noise, her gaze constantly darting towards the windows, as if expecting Cromwell's dark visage to materialize at any moment. Tom, too, felt the oppressive weight of the impending confrontation. He knew Pierce's threat wasn't idle. Men like Alistair Cromwell didn't make idle threats. They issued ultimatums. He found himself sleeping lightly, his ears tuned to every creak of the old farmhouse, his mind racing with contingency plans he hoped he'd never have to use. He even resurrected his grandfather's old hunting rifle from the back of the closet, cleaning and oiling it with a grim sense of purpose, though the thought of actually using it made his stomach churn. He was a mender, a fixer, not a fighter, but he would fight for these girls, for this small, precious family he was desperately trying to protect. Clara, with her child's intuition, sensed the shift in the atmosphere. She became quieter, more clingy, her bright chatter often dissolving into anxious silence. She would frequently seek out Lily, tucking her small hand into Lily's, offering a silent, fierce loyalty that was both heartbreaking and profoundly moving. One evening, as Tom was attempting to repair a perpetually leaky faucet in the kitchen sink, a task that suddenly felt overwhelmingly symbolic of his larger, more desperate struggle to keep their lives from unraveling, Lily approached him, a tattered, leather-bound journal clutched in her hands. "Tom," she said, her voice barely a whisper, there's something I need to show you, something you need to know, about Alistair, about everything." Tom straightened up, wiping his wet hands on a rag. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also a new steely resolve. He nodded, his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. "Okay, Lily, let's talk." They sat at the worn kitchen table, Clara asleep in her room, the only sounds the gentle ticking of the old wall clock and the distant sigh of the wind outside. Lily opened the journal, its pages filled with a cramped, spidery handwriting interspersed with stark, unsettling sketches. "This was my mother's," Lily began, her voice trembling. She started writing it after she married Alistair. At first it was hopeful. She thought he was charming, sophisticated. She thought he loved her. Her voice broke. But then he started to change. Or maybe, she corrected herself, a bitter wisdom in her young voice. He just stopped pretending. She turned a page, revealing a drawing of a beautiful, smiling woman, her eyes bright with a light that was painfully absent in Lily's own. "That's her, before." Then she flipped to another page, a darker, more chaotic sketch of a grand, opulent room, but with bars on the windows, the smiling woman now a shadowy figure, small and hunched in a corner. "And this," Lily whispered, "was after." She read excerpts from the journal, her voice gaining a chilling clarity as she recounted her mother's descent into a gilded hell. Alistair Cromwell, it turned out, was not just a controlling stepfather. He was a monster of psychological and emotional abuse. He had isolated Lily's mother, systematically dismantling her confidence, her friendships, her very sense of self. He controlled her finances, her movements, even her thoughts, his kindness, a suffocating web of manipulation and gaslighting. Lily, her mother's beloved daughter, had become a pawn in his cruel game, a tool to further control and torment her mother. The journal chronicled Alistair's obsession with purity and legacy, his twisted belief that Lily, as the scion of an old, though not particularly wealthy family her mother hailed from, was somehow a purer vessel for the Cromwell name than any child he might have with Lily's mother, whom he increasingly viewed as flawed and disappointing. He had begun to groom Lily, in his own insidious way, for a future he had meticulously planned. A future that involved isolating her from her mother and molding her into his perfect pliant heiress. The bruises Lily carried were not from Alistair directly, not yet, but from the increasingly desperate, erratic outbursts of her mother, a woman broken by years of abuse, who sometimes lashed out at the very child she was trying to protect. Her mind fractured by Alistair's relentless cruelty. "She didn't mean to hurt me," Lily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She was just so scared. And he made her that way. He told her if she ever tried to leave, if she ever told anyone, he would destroy her. He would make sure she never saw me again." Tom listened in stunned, horrified silence, his fists clenching, a cold, murderous rage building in his chest. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The Blackwood mansion, its isolation, the caretakers, Lily's terror, her mother's desperate, final act of telling Lily to run, to find safety, even if it meant abandoning her to an unknown fate. Lily's mother, it seemed, had finally found the courage to fight back, not for herself, but for her daughter. She had orchestrated Lily's escape, a desperate last-ditch effort to free her from Alistair's clutches, likely knowing it would cost her everything. "Where is your mother now, Lily?" Tom asked, his voice hoarse. Lily shook her head, fresh tears welling. "I don't know. The last I saw her, she was distracting the men Alistair had watching the house. She told me to run towards the old logging road, to hide, to find someone, anyone, kind, she said. She said she loved me more than her own life." The raw courage, the sheer maternal sacrifice in that act, left Tom breathless. He reached across the table and gently took Lily's trembling hands. "Your mother is a hero, Lily," he said. his voice thick with emotion. "A true hero, and Alistair Cromwell, he's going to pay for what he's done." In that moment, something shifted in Tom Henderson. The quiet handyman, the grieving widower, the struggling single dad was gone. In his place stood a man filled with a cold, righteous fury, a man who would not rest until Lily was truly free, and until Alistair Cromwell faced justice for the devastation he had wrought. The journal, her mother's desperate, heartbreaking testimony, was their weapon. And Tom, with Lily's permission, knew exactly who needed to see it. The quiet town of Oakhaven was about to become the unlikely battleground in a war against a very powerful, very dangerous man. And Tom Henderson, armed with nothing but the truth and an unshakable resolve, was ready for the fight. The following morning, Tom, armed with Lily's mother's journal and a grim determination, drove to the county seat to meet with District Attorney Frank Peterson, an old high school acquaintance known for his sharp mind and bulldog tenacity. He laid out the story, the journal serving as chilling, irrefutable evidence of Alistair Cromwell's monstrous cruelty and Lily's mother's desperate plight. Peterson, initially skeptical, grew visibly shaken as he read the raw, heartbreaking entries. By the end, his face was a mask of cold fury. "This Cromwell," Peterson said, his voice tight with disbelief and anger, "he's not just a monster. He's a ghoul preying on the vulnerable. We need to find Lily's mother, and we need to bring Cromwell down." The investigation began immediately, discreetly at first, then with gathering force. Peterson's office, working with state and even federal agencies, Cromwell's influence, it turned out, was far-reaching, his business dealings often skirting the edges of legality, began to unravel the complex web of Alistair Cromwell's empire of control. They discovered a pattern of intimidation, financial manipulation, and a network of shell corporations that hinted at activities far darker than mere emotional abuse. Meanwhile, back in Oakhaven, Tom and Lily, with Clara's unwavering support, prepared for the storm they knew was coming. Arthur Pierce, Cromwell's lawyer, began a relentless campaign of harassment, threatening letters, invasive surveillance, even attempts to intimidate local businesses that worked with Tom. But Oakhaven, a town that valued loyalty and quiet courage, rallied around the Hendersons and their young ward. Mrs. Gable started a neighborhood watch. Martha Evans, armed with her infamous blueberry pies, became a regular fixture on Tom's porch, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Even Sheriff Brody, initially cautious, found his resolve hardening as more details of Cromwell's depravity came to light, assigning a deputy to patrol Tom's property regularly. Lily, though still haunted by her past, found a strange sense of empowerment in the fight. She worked with Tom and Peterson's investigators, her sharp memory and insightful observations proving invaluable. She was no longer just a victim. She was a warrior, fighting for her mother, for her own future, and for the memory of the life Alistair Cromwell had stolen from them. The media inevitably got wind of the story. At first it was salacious tabloid fodder. Runaway heiress hides out with small-town handyman. But as more credible journalists began to dig, fueled by anonymous leaks from Peterson's office and the damning contents of the journal, the narrative began to shift. Alistair Cromwell, the reclusive billionaire, the pillar of industry, was suddenly facing a firestorm of public scrutiny. His carefully crafted image began to crumble. The climax came during a tense, pre-trial hearing. Cromwell, arrogant and dismissive, tried to paint Lily's mother as mentally unstable, Lily as a confused, easily manipulated child, and Tom as a fortune-hunting opportunist. But Peterson, armed with the journal, financial records, and damning testimony from former Cromwell employees who had finally found the courage to speak out, systematically dismantled his lies. The journal entry detailing Lily's mother's desperate plea for her daughter to run to find kindness was read aloud in the hushed courtroom, a raw, heartbreaking testament to a mother's love and a monster's cruelty. Cromwell's composure finally shattered. He lunged toward the witness stand, his face contorted with rage. Before being restrained by court officers, the mask was off. The world had seen the monster beneath. In the end, Alistair Cromwell's empire of control crumbled under the weight of his own depravity. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a lengthy, reputation-destroying trial, he agreed to a plea deal that saw him stripped of his guardianship of Lily, his assets frozen, and his freedom severely curtailed. More importantly, the investigation into his business dealings unearthed a hornet's nest of illegal activities that would keep him entangled in legal battles for years to come. And then, the news they had all been praying for. Lily's mother, whose real name was Annalise, was found. She was alive, though deeply traumatized, hidden away in a remote wellness clinic, one of Alistair's many gilded cages. The reunion between Lily and Annalise was a torrent of tears, whispered apologies, and fierce, desperate hugs. Tom and Clara watched from a respectful distance, their own eyes filled with tears, witnessing a bond that had survived the unimaginable. Annalise, though fragile, possessed an inner strength that mirrored her daughter's. With Tom's unwavering support and the unexpected kindness of the Oakhaven community, she began the slow, arduous journey of healing. She and Lily, along with Clara, became an inseparable trio, their laughter, once a rare and precious commodity, now a regular joyful sound in the Henderson household. Tom, the quiet handyman who had simply offered a helping hand, found himself at the center of a found family, his small paint-peeling house now overflowing with a love and warmth he hadn't dared to dream of since Laura's passing. His life was no longer defined by what he had lost, but by what he had found, by the courage he had discovered within himself, and by the extraordinary resilience of a teenage girl and her mother, who had shown him that even in the deepest darkness, the smallest spark of kindness could ignite a beacon of hope. The years later part of the title implies a significant passage of time where Lily, now presumably an adult and having come into her own, perhaps through education, her artistic talents, or even inheriting responsibly managed funds from her mother's side or a settlement, is in a position to make such a grand gesture. The story, having focused on the immediate crisis and the formation of their bond, would now need to bridge that gap. This often happens in a more summarized or montage-like fashion in these stories, focusing on key milestones. Annalise, Lily's mother, slowly but surely, began to reclaim her life. The quiet sanctuary of Tom's home, the unwavering support of the Oakhaven community, and the fierce, unconditional love of her daughter became the fertile ground for her healing. The nightmares didn't vanish overnight. The scars of Alistair's abuse ran deep. But with each passing day, a little more of the vibrant, intelligent woman she once was, the woman Alistair had tried so desperately to extinguish, re-emerged. She found solace in gardening, transforming the neglected patch behind Tom's house into a riot of color and fragrance. She started volunteering at the local library, her gentle voice and patient explanations making her a favorite during children's story hour. And she began to paint again, her canvases filled not with the dark, abstract turmoil of her past, but with light, with hope, with the faces of the people who had shown her such extraordinary kindness. Lily, too, blossomed. Freed from the oppressive shadow of Alistair's control, her innate intelligence and creativity flourished. She excelled in school, her sharp mind and insatiable curiosity impressing her teachers. Her artistic talents, once confined to secret sketches in a hidden journal, found a new outlet. With Tom's encouragement, she started creating intricate sculptures from scrap metal and discarded objects found in his workshop, transforming junk into art with a unique, visionary flair. Clara, her steadfast companion and adopted sister, was her biggest cheerleader, proudly displaying Lily's creations throughout the house. The bond between Tom and Annalise deepened, evolving from shared trauma and mutual respect into a quiet, tender love. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a slow, steady unfurling, like a fern in a shaded forest reaching towards the light. They found solace in each other's company in shared meals, in late-night conversations on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the vast, silent sky. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic pronouncements, just a comfortable, unassuming intimacy that spoke of a love built on trust, understanding, and a shared history of survival. Years passed. Lily, with the support of a carefully managed trust fund, established from her mother's original family assets, distinct from Cromwell's tainted wealth, and overseen by a board that included D.A. Peterson and even a grudgingly respectful representative, appointed by a now much chastened Cromwell family still trying to salvage some semblance of their name. Went off to college, then to art school, her talent for sculpture earning her critical acclaim and a burgeoning reputation in the art world. Annalise, her strength fully restored, became a passionate advocate for victims of domestic abuse, her quiet dignity and profound empathy inspiring countless others. She and Tom, their love a steady, unwavering beacon, eventually married in a simple ceremony in their beloved garden, surrounded by the Oak Haven community that had embraced them as their own. Clara, a bright, compassionate young woman, was her maid of honor. Throughout it all, Lily never forgot the kindness that had saved her, the sanctuary that had allowed her to heal. She returned to Oak Haven often, her visits a joyful infusion of energy and laughter into the Henderson, now Miller household. She saw Tom still working tirelessly in his workshop, his hands still calloused, his heart still as big as the Montana sky, though the lines of worry around his eyes had softened, replaced by a quiet contentment. She saw the small farmhouse, still paint-peeling in places, still overflowing with love, but also showing the wear and tear of years of struggle, the constant battle against leaky roofs and aging plumbing that Tom, despite his skill, could never quite seem to get ahead of financially. And so Lily, now a successful artist in her own right, with a wisdom and grace that belied her years, began to plan. It was a secret she kept close to her heart, a quiet act of love and gratitude that had been years in the making. She enlisted the help of D.A. Peterson, now a close family friend and a discreet architect. She wanted to give Tom, Annalise, and Clara not just a gift, but a symbol of everything they had built together, a home that reflected the beauty, the resilience, and the enduring love that had blossomed from such a dark and terrifying beginning. The surprise was orchestrated with meticulous care. On the anniversary of the day, Tom had found her huddled on the porch of the Blackwood mansion, a day they now referred to as their sanctuary day. Lily arranged for Tom, Annalise, and Clara to be taken on a mystery outing. When they returned, bewildered but intrigued, their old, beloved farmhouse was still there, but beside it, nestled amongst the trees, where an old, dilapidated shed once stood, was a new house. It wasn't a mansion, not an ostentatious display of wealth, but a beautiful, thoughtfully designed home, built of warm wood and local stone, with wide, welcoming windows that seemed to drink in the sunlight. It had a spacious workshop for Tom, a sun-drenched art studio for Annalise and Lily, a cozy library overflowing with books for Clara, and a kitchen big enough for all of them to bake cookies together without bumping elbows. Tears streamed down Tom's face as Lily, her own eyes shining, handed him the keys. "You gave me a home when I had nothing, Tom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You taught me what it means to be safe, to be loved, to be part of a family. This is just a small way of saying thank you. For everything." Annalise hugged her daughter fiercely, her own tears flowing freely. Clara danced with joy, already planning where her glitter collection would go. Tom, rendered speechless, could only pull Lily into a crushing hug, his heart overflowing with a love and gratitude so profound it seemed to fill the very air around them. The new house wasn't just a structure of wood and stone. It was a testament to the enduring power of kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the extraordinary transformative love of a found family. It was a home built not on riches, but on the far more valuable currency of compassion, courage, and second chances. And as they stood together, watching the sun set over the rolling hills of Oakhaven, their new home glowing warmly in the twilight, they knew with a certainty that resonated deep in their souls that they were truly, finally, home. What an incredible journey of survival, healing, and the kind of love that builds a true sanctuary. From a terrifying escape to a home filled with warmth and finally to a beautiful new beginning, Lily, Annalise, and Tom's story is a powerful reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal, and that kindness offered without expectation can change the course of lives in the most miraculous ways. I'm so moved by their story, and I'd love to know what resonated most with you. Was it Tom's quiet strength, Lily's incredible resilience, or Annalise's journey back to herself? Please share your thoughts and where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always wonderful to see how these stories connect us, no matter where we are in the world. If stories of courage, found family, and the redemptive power of love touch your heart, please do subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next inspiring tale. And if this story of hope and healing made your day a little brighter, a thumbs up would be deeply appreciated. It helps these stories reach even more people who might need to hear them. Thank you so much for joining us for this heartfelt journey. Your support means everything. Until next